Usually when we think about getting results, there's this deeply ingrained expectation of physical friction. Like we view work as this massive industrial machine.
Oh, absolutely. A very mechanical view of human effort.
Right. You grab a heavy iron lever, you pull it with all your body weight, the gears grind, steam hisses out of a pipe, and then, eventually a finished product drops off the conveyor belt.
Yeah, we find immense psychological comfort in that visible transfer of energy. We essentially want the universe to operate like a giant vending machine.
A vending machine, I like that.
Right, you put your coin of effort in, you press the button, and a predictable, tangible reward just falls out into the tray.
But then you step into the world of high-stakes decision-making, whether that's financial markets or executive leadership or even just, navigating a complex personal relationship.
And suddenly that entire conveyor belt just shatters.
Exactly. We find ourselves looking at a landscape where the actual mechanics of success are completely counterintuitive. And, well, that brings us to the mission of today's deep dive.
Which is a really vital topic for anyone looking to refine their strategy.
Totally. So this is episode number 3, The Discipline of Not Acting. We are pulling from some genuinely brilliant source material today, written by an author named Stefan.
And our goal today is to completely deconstruct the way you, the listener, evaluate your own decisions.
Because the very first concept we're hitting is a total mind bender. It's a hook that entirely flipped my understanding of performance.
It really is wild when you first read it.
Right. The author states, without a hint of irony, that the absolute greatest, most masterful trade they ever made in their career was a trade they did not take.
Yeah, that statement instantly destabilizes that whole vending machine illusion we just talked about.
It really does.
Yeah.
Okay, let's unpack this absurdity on its face.
Yeah.
Because if I am a listener hearing that for the first time, it sounds ridiculous.
Oh, it goes against everything we're taught.
How can doing absolutely nothing be considered a good decision, let alone your finest hour? Especially in a high-stakes, results-driven arena like day trading. I mean, you literally do not make a single dollar by sitting on your hands.
Well, the absurdity only exists if you judge a decision by the immediate outcome it produces. This text is built on a foundational, uncompromising principle.
Which is?
You must sever the quality of decision from its subsequent result.
Wow. Okay, that's a massive shift.
It is, because we are socially and biologically conditioned to look at what happens next. If we make a choice and we win, we pat ourselves on the back and call ourselves geniuses.
Right, and if we make a choice and lose, we beat ourselves up for being foolish.
Exactly. But in probabilistic environments, and we should be very clear that almost all of life is a probabilistic environment, a decision is never inherently correct just because it happens to produce a favorable result.
I want to pause and drill into this concept of a probabilistic environment, because it feels like the key to unlocking this whole philosophy, right? Well, you weren't just talking about math class here.
No, not at all. A probabilistic environment simply means that you're operating in a system where you do not, and honestly cannot, know all the variables.
Like the weather?
Yes. Perfect example. A meteorologist can look at radar, wind patterns, historical models, and say, there is a 90% chance of sunshine tomorrow.
And if you plan a picnic based on that data, that is a fantastic, high-quality decision.
Right. But if a freak storm rolls in and ruins your picnic, your decision to plan it wasn't suddenly a bad decision. You made the most mathematically sound choice available based on the information present at that exact moment.
So the quality of the decision was locked in the moment I made it, based on my rules and the data I had.
Precisely. The outcome is just the universe rolling the dice. The author illustrates this perfectly with a specific scenario from the text.
Oh, the one about sitting at the screens.
Yeah. They describe a moment sitting at their trading screens where a setup looked almost flawless. The market was moving aggressively, the entry point was obvious, the target was clear.
And, their mind was already building a narrative, right? Already feeling that dopamine rush of the anticipated profit.
Oh, totally. But according to their strict trading plan, one single minor condition was missing.
And let's be honest, that is the exact moment where human nature usually caves. It would be incredibly easy to rationalize that away.
Oh, completely.
You'd say, well, it's close enough. The market is hot. Momentum is on my side. And I really don't want to sit here and watch this rocket take off without me.
The gravitational pull of that fear of missing out, it's immense. But instead of caving, they chose restraint. They let the opportunity pass.
Now, the natural assumption here would be that the market immediately tanked, right? And the author felt like a genius for dodging a bullet.
Right. That's the Hollywood ending. But that isn't the point. The text explicitly notes that the eventual failure or success of that specific market move is entirely irrelevant to why refusing it was the right decision.
Because if they had taken it, they would have been violating their own rules. They'd be acting on an impulse rather than a system.
And that is the crux of the issue. The real challenge of mastery isn't learning how to press the button. I mean, anyone can click a mouse to buy a stock.
Right. Anyone can impulsively jump into a new business venture or send a reckless email.
Exactly. The actual rare skill is learning how to identify which response a specific environment requires. Sometimes the environment screams for aggressive execution.
But very frequently, the correct, mathematically sound action is absolute restraint.
Yes.
I want you, the listener, to bring this out of the financial markets and right into your lap for a second. Think about how often you force an action in your own day-to-day life just to feel like you were doing something.
Oh, that's such a common trap.
Right. How often do you send that third unnecessary follow-up email to a client or tweak the fonts on a presentation for the 20th time?
Or aggressively intervene in your teenager's social drama.
Exactly. Just because the sheer anxiety of waiting, the discomfort of not acting, is eating you alive.
We manufacture action to self-medicate our own anxiety. It gives us a false sense of control over a chaotic world.
It's a coping mechanism.
It really is. And to understand why we struggle so profoundly with this concept of not acting, we have to examine the societal conditioning that defines our concept of work.
The deep dive into the historical and social definition of work in this material is fascinating. It contrasts the traditional, highly visible work we all recognize with the completely invisible work of decision-making.
Yeah, going back to the vending machine analogy.
Right. Think about a carpenter. A carpenter works all day, and at 5 o'clock there is a pile of sawdust on the floor, sweat soaking their shirt, and a physical oak table sitting in the room.
Or a writer has a stack of printed pages. A door-to-door salesperson have a log of 50 houses visited.
In those professions, the correlation between physical exertion and progress is direct. It's visually undeniable.
But strategic decision-making operates in a completely different dimension. If you look at a professional trader, the visible physical act of working, like the clicking of a mouse to place an order, takes perhaps 2 seconds.
So what are they doing the other 7 hours and 59 minutes?
They are engaged in the invisible work. The real labor happens long before the physical click.
What does that actually look like, though?
It's the grueling process of observing data, preparing mental models, defining specific mathematical conditions, evaluating risk-to-reward ratios,
Basically
waiting, and repeatedly, exhaustingly deciding not to act. A high-level professional can spend 6 hours staring intensely at a market, processing tens of thousands of data points, and ultimately take 0 positions.
Now imagine a spouse or a friend walking into that office at the end of the day.
Yeah.
They just see someone who has been staring blankly at a glowing rectangle all day.
Yeah, it looks identical to someone who just binge-watched 6 hours of YouTube.
Right. It looks like pure, unadulterated laziness. There is no sawdust. There's no oak table.
None at all.
Okay, I have to represent the skeptical listener here.
So,
And I want to push back on this with some real teeth.
bring it on.
Because I hear that, but if I'm a retail trader or a freelancer or an entrepreneur trying to pay my mortgage, and I sit on my hands for an entire week waiting for this supposedly perfect setup, I go broke.
Sure, I see where you're going.
How is this philosophy not just a very intellectual, fancy excuse for analysis paralysis? Where is the hustle?
That is the exact trap most people fall into when they hear the word patience. And it's why we have to distinguish between active restraint and passive avoidance.
Okay, break that down.
There is a massive structural difference between sitting at a screen paralyzed by fear or distracted by social media and correctly executing a highly structured system where the output for that specific day just happens to be no action.
So you're saying that if my system requires conditions A, B, and C to be present, and the market only gives me A and B, doing nothing means I successfully executed my job today.
You executed it flawlessly. Your capital is completely protected. You did not take on risk without a statistical justification.
I didn't warp my own rules just to manufacture a cheap thrill.
Exactly. The absence of a trade in that scenario is not the absence of a decision. Refusing to act when based on a system is a highly aggressive, active choice.
The absence of a trade was the decision. Wow. That completely reframes the day. But man, the psychological tension that must create inside the human brain has to be wild.
Oh, it's incredibly taxing.
Because from the moment we're born, we're told that action equals progress. Try again. Work harder, make your own luck. If you aren't sweating, you aren't grinding.
And that conditioned mindset becomes lethal in an environment that does not reward effort. The market, and by extension, the broader universe of probability, does not care how hard you studied your charts last night.
It really doesn't.
It doesn't care that you've been sitting in an uncomfortable desk chair feeling bored for 4 hours. It certainly doesn't owe you a paycheck just because you booted up your laptop.
Right, and when the environment doesn't provide a valid opportunity, the urge to act begins to mutate, doesn't it?
It does. It disguises itself as professionalism.
Oh, that is insidious. The brain rationalizes the anxiety by saying, well, I am a professional and professionals make things happen. I need to get in there and mix it up.
Exactly. So the standards begin to slip. You start looking at a different time frame on the chart. You slightly reinterpret a rule.
You convince yourself that a messy, highly volatile setup is close enough to your criteria.
And why are you doing this? Because you have a desperate internal need for the market to give you something to do, to validate your own identity as a worker.
You are equating action with progress, completely ignoring the fact that the wrong action actively destroys progress.
Completely.
This maps onto so many non-financial areas of life, too. Think about the classic helicopter parent.
Oh, great example.
A child is struggling to build a block tower or figure out a math problem, and the parent swoops in and does it for them. The parent feels incredibly productive.
They feel like they're doing the good work of parenting through action.
Right, but that action is destructive. It stunts the child's ability to learn frustration tolerance and problem solving.
Or consider a doctor who overprescribes antibiotics for a minor viral infection just so the patient feels like they got treated.
Which ultimately damages the patient's gut biome and contributes to antibiotic resistance.
Or a new manager who takes over a high-performing team and starts micromanaging every workflow, implementing new software, scheduling endless check-ins.
The manager feels busy, but they're destroying the team's momentum. Bad action is worse than no action.
Which brings us to the most critical pivot point in this entire discussion.
Okay, lay it on us.
If we cannot measure our success by how much visible action we take, and if we cannot even measure it by the immediate result because of the probabilistic nature of the world, how on earth do we measure our own competence?
And this leads us to what the source material defines as the first variable, cause before effect.
Yes. The concept is that you have to completely invert how you review your day. You have to look backward from the visible effect to the hidden internal cause.
So before you allow yourself to celebrate a massive financial win, or before you brutally criticize yourself for a day of total inactivity, you have to ruthlessly interrogate the internal behavior that led to the outcome.
Exactly. The text offers a brilliant hypothetical scenario that perfectly illustrates this dynamic. Imagine two traders, Trader A and Trader B.
Okay, I'm picturing them.
Both of them sit at their respective desks for the entire 8-hour trading session. Both of them walk away at the closing bell having taken absolutely no action.
Okay, so from a purely external, objective viewpoint, the effect is identical. 0 trades placed, $0 made, $0 lost.
But internally, they might as well be on different planets.
Completely different realities. Let's look at the hidden causes. Trader A took no action because over the course of those 8 hours, their specific, predefined setup never materialized.
The market was choppy. The volume was low. The conditions were muddy. They adhered strictly to their rules. They demonstrated supreme, almost monk-like discipline.
Now let's look at Trader B.
Trader B, however, is a nervous wreck. Maybe they took a devastating outsized loss the day before, so today they're operating from a place of deep psychological trauma.
Oh, we've all been there.
Right. So at 10 a.m., a perfectly valid setup appears on their screen, a setup that meets every single rule in their playbook, one they have tested and proven to have a mathematical edge.
But they freeze. They shrink back.
They are too terrified to pull the trigger because they cannot stomach the possibility of another loss. They actively avoid taking necessary risk.
So from the outside, my spouse walks in and says, hey, how was work? And both Trader A and Trader B say, it was fine. I was really patient today. I didn't force anything. But one of them is lying.
And worse, they're lying to themselves. The internal cause for Trader A was structural discipline. The internal cause for Trader B was emotional avoidance.
This is why it is so incredibly dangerous to learn lessons based purely on visible outcomes.
Precisely. If Trader B just looks at their account balance at the end of the day, sees they didn't lose any money, and congratulates themselves for being patient, they are reinforcing cowardice.
They're literally training their brain to associate fear with safety and calling it a virtue. It's like calling yourself a master negotiator just because you were too terrified to ask your boss for a raise, so nobody ever told you no.
That's exactly it. You didn't exercise restraint, you exercised avoidance. But on paper, on the ledger, it looks exactly the same as patience.
Which guarantees long-term failure. Cause must always be evaluated before effect.
Always. The outcome, the blank ledger or the pile of money, is just the final superficial expression of a process that began much earlier in the deepest layers of the mind.
If the cause is corrupted by emotion, the entire process is fundamentally broken, regardless of what the outcome happens to be that day.
And to really help us visualize what this disciplined waiting actually looks like in practice, the author shifts gears and uses one of the most vivid, evocative analogies I have ever read.
Yes, we're moving out of the office and into the wilderness. The Cougar Principle.
The mountain lion. It is the absolute perfect biological metaphor for the concept of selective commitment.
Right. So think about the anatomy and the hunting style of a cougar. It's a highly specialized ambush predator. It does not survive by behaving like a wolf pack, endlessly running down a rabbit across 3 miles of open snowy terrain.
No, if it did, it would be dead in a week. It would rapidly expend all its caloric energy.
It doesn't sprint aggressively after every single rustling leaf or every single thing that moves in its peripheral vision.
In trading terms, it would exhaust its capital and its emotional bandwidth on low-probability setups.
Exactly. For the cougar, waiting is not the absence of hunting. Waiting is a fundamental phase of the hunt.
It climbs to a vantage point. It uses the cover of the rocks. It observes the direction of the wind, the slope of the terrain, the movement patterns of the herd below.
It actively conserves its biological energy until 3 things align: the distance, the timing, and the risk.
And when those variables become highly favorable, and only then, it commits with explosive, total violence.
And equally important is what happens in the immediate aftermath of a failure.
This is crucial.
Because if the cougar lunges, and by some stroke of luck the prey dodges and escapes down the mountain, the cougar does not engage in an endless, desperate emotional pursuit.
It does not chase the deer at all costs, thrashing through the woods in a blind rage to get its meal back.
Which is exactly what we do when we lose money. I have to make it back right now. I'm going to double my position.
The cougar just stops. It immediately accepts the loss of the energy expended on that specific lunge. It resets its nervous system, climbs back up the rock, and preserves whatever energy it has left for the next highly qualified opportunity.
The cougar does not confuse movement with effectiveness. I absolutely love how directly this applies to our own daily energy.
It's a powerful way to think about it.
Listeners, think about your cognitive bandwidth as a bank account. If you are constantly chasing every minor distraction, fighting every petty political battle at the office, arguing with every anonymous troll on social media, you are a mountain lion chasing butterflies.
You're bleeding out your caloric energy on zero-return activities.
Exactly. So when the real opportunity finally walks by, the massive career pivot, the chance to start the business, the moment to make the big investment, you are going to be too exhausted, too mentally depleted to take it down.
That is a phenomenal way to contextualize it. The crucial distinction the text makes here is that this behavior is not passivity. The cougar is not being lazy.
Right. It's heavily engaged in a different modality of action: observation, assessment, and preparation.
This is selective commitment. The lesson here is not a blanket directive to just trade less or do less in your life.
Because if a market is incredibly active and providing highly valid, mathematically sound opportunities every 10 minutes, a disciplined trader will act frequently.
And if the opportunities are rare, they act rarely.
Because the environment dictates the frequency, but you dictate the standard.
Beautifully said. The overarching principle is simply this: do not take on risk without a statistically sufficient reason.
So how do we actually do this? I mean, operating like a cougar sounds incredibly cool in theory, but actually executing it requires an almost superhuman level of self-control.
It does. And to achieve this, the text breaks down the required psychology into 3 distinct overlapping mental states: discipline, patience, and clarity.
People use these 3 words interchangeably all the time, like they are synonyms on a motivational poster. But in this framework, they mean very different things.
Very different. Let's untangle them, starting with discipline.
Okay.
Discipline within this specific framework is defined as protecting the structure. It is the raw ability to follow a valid, tested process when every ounce of internal emotional pressure is screaming at you to deviate.
It means keeping your risk parameters strictly within limits and refusing to engage in revenge trading when you are furious about a recent loss.
Right. But the text makes a deeply counterintuitive point about discipline here.
Yeah, because we almost always define discipline as restraint, holding back.
Yeah.
But it's not just the ability to say no, is it?
No, it is not. Discipline is entirely context dependent. Sometimes discipline means forcing yourself to say yes when every instinct is begging you to hesitate.
Oh, this goes back to Trader B from earlier.
Exactly. The one paralyzed by fear after a losing streak. If you sit patiently for 3 hours observing the market and then your predefined, mathematically sound setup suddenly appears on the screen and you fail to execute the trade because you're scared of losing again, you are wildly undisciplined.
Wow. So restraint was the appropriate disciplined action during the waiting phase. But explosive execution became the disciplined action the second the conditions changed.
Discipline serves the strategy. It never serves your preferred emotional state.
That's a great line.
And this is where people deceive themselves. Some people feel inherently safer when they're out of the market, hugging their cash, so they chronically avoid risk and proudly call their fear patience.
And other people are adrenaline junkies who feel safer when they're constantly busy and in the mix, so they overtrade and call their frantic impatience responsiveness.
Real discipline is measured solely by your alignment with your tested rules, regardless of how terrifying or boring it feels in the moment.
Okay, if that is discipline, how does patience differ? Where do they overlap?
Patience is specifically the state of readiness without urgency. It is the psychological ability to remain highly prepared to act while being completely at peace with the possibility that the environment may not require any action from you today.
And here is where the text points out a massive, very common trap: confusing patience with waiting for certainty.
Yes, a truly patient person is never waiting for absolute certainty because they understand that absolute certainty does not exist in a probabilistic world.
Right.
They're only waiting for predefined conditions to align. That is the critical distinction that prevents healthy patients from rotting into toxic perfectionism.
You do not look at a chart and ask, does this feel 100% safe? Because the answer will always be no.
You ask, are my specific required conditions present? Patience is simply the mechanism that creates a wedge of mental space between a sudden impulse and a physical action.
And inside that wedge, inside that pause created by patience, that's where the third pillar activates: clarity.
Clarity is the lens. It's the ability to see what is actually happening in reality without distorting the incoming data through the filter of your own emotional needs, past traumas, or desperate desires.
It is the vital ability to distinguish an objective observation from an emotional interpretation.
We need to really break that down because the human brain is a relentless storytelling machine.
Oh, it never stops.
Yeah.
That line between observation and interpretation gets incredibly blurry when money is on the line. Give me a concrete example.
Let's say you're looking at a stock chart. An objective observation is the market price has moved up 2% in the last hour.
That's a neutral mathematical fact.
Right. Now, an emotional interpretation of that exact same data point is the market is moving up without me. I'm an idiot for not getting in earlier. And if I don't buy right now, I am going to miss out on all the profits.
The observation is just raw data. The interpretation is the entire theatrical play my ego is writing about the data.
Let's do another one. Observation. The price is currently approaching a historical resistance level where it has previously bounced.
Okay.
Interpretation. This is definitely the absolute top. It is mathematically guaranteed to reverse. Right here, I have to short it immediately.
When you lack clarity, you literally begin to hallucinate. You see what your emotions expect to see.
Exactly. If you're desperately behind on your rent, ordinary random market fluctuations suddenly start looking like massive, guaranteed opportunities.
Clarity does not mean you become a cold, unfeeling robot, though.
No, not at all. It just means you possess the self-awareness to recognize the difference between the actual reality unfolding on the screen and the fictional, fear-based story your mind is projecting onto the screen.
So to weave the three pillars together into a cohesive system, patience gives you the necessary pause. Clarity allows you to look at the environment truthfully during that pause. And discipline is the heavy muscle that steps in to execute the correct choice once you see it clearly.
They operate in a perfect, continuous symbiosis.
But just when you think you have it all figured out, the text throws a massive psychological wrench into the gears.
Oh, here we go.
Because even if you master discipline, patience, and clarity, you could still fall into what might be the most dangerous trap of all: judging a decision purely by its financial outcome. This is the phenomenon of the profitable mistake.
The profitable mistake is perhaps the most difficult concept for the human nervous system to accept. We are biologically hardwired to be outcome-oriented creatures.
Right, if we eat a berry and we don't die, we assume the berry is safe.
But trading, and much of complex modern life, is a probabilistic process. This means the connective tissue between one single decision and one immediate result is incredibly weak.
You can do everything right. You can follow every single rule, manage your risk perfectly, execute with total clarity, and still lose money on a trade.
And conversely, you can completely violate your trading plan, throw your risk management out the window, take a highly impulsive, emotionally driven gamble based on pure rage, and happen to make a fortune.
And the author argues that making a fortune that way is the absolute worst thing that can possibly happen to a trader.
It is incredibly toxic, because a profitable mistake is still fundamentally a mistake.
Right.
If you reward yourself emotionally or financially for a profitable mistake, you're reinforcing a neural pathway for a behavior that does not have a long-term statistical edge.
You're training yourself to be reckless.
Over a large enough sample size, the math will catch up to you, and that exact same behavior will inevitably destroy your account.
It makes me think of playing blackjack at a casino.
Oh, that's a perfect analogy.
Let's say you're Delta 20. The book, the math, the absolute undisputed strategy says you stand, but you get a wild hair, you feel lucky, and you tap the table to hit.
The dealer flips over an ace. You get 21.
You win the hand, the whole table cheers, you get paid out, and in that one isolated moment, you look like an absolute maverick genius.
But if you play blackjack that way, hitting on 20s for an entire month, you won't just lose, you'll be living in your car.
Exactly. The shiny, positive outcome of that one isolated hand completely blinded you to the disastrous, mathematically suicidal quality of the decision.
The math always collects its due eventually. And this brings us to the immense compounding costs of what the author terms unqualified activity.
Which is a polite academic term for forcing trades or actions that do not belong to your proven strategy.
When you force action to alleviate boredom or anxiety, you aren't just taking a random harmless shot in the dark. You are actively bleeding your account and your psyche dry in 4 distinct, measurable ways.
Let's spend some real time breaking these 4 costs down, because the implications here go way beyond just trading accounts. What is the first cost of unqualified activity?
The first cost is the loss of edge preservation. In trading, a statistical edge means that over a series of events, your strategy has a higher probability of making money than losing it.
Okay, so let's say your strict strategy has a 60% win rate.
Right. Every additional impulsive trade you take outside of that strategy is not an additional opportunity to make money. It is additional exposure to the market without a mathematical advantage.
If you get bored and start taking weaker, unproven variations of your setups, you're essentially diluting your original 60% edge with coin flips.
You're watering down the good stuff until your overall expectancy drops to 0.
You are sabotaging your own math. What's the second cost?
Execution quality. We have to talk about decision fatigue.
Oh, this is huge.
The human brain is a biological organ, and it consumes massive amounts of glucose when making complex risk assessments. Think about the famous studies of parole board judges who grant fewer paroles right before lunch because their mental energy is depleted.
Wow, yeah. If you're constantly forcing action, constantly staring at every minor tick of the chart, your decision-making faculty degrades rapidly.
You start entering positions late because you're second-guessing yourself. You start moving your stop losses out of fear. You abandon your criteria.
You exhaust all your premium cognitive energy on garbage trades, so when the Cougar's actual prey finally walks by at 2 p.m., your execution is sloppy and you miss the real move.
That makes total sense. You only have so many good decisions in the tank every day.
The third cost mentioned in the text is transaction costs, which feels very specific to the mechanics of trading, but it's a silent killer.
It is the friction of the system. We're talking about spreads, broker commissions, and slippage.
Can you break down slippage for the listener who might not be familiar? It sounds like falling on ice.
In a way, it is a loss of traction. When you click buy at a specific price you see on your screen, you are sending an order to an exchange. But the market is highly fluid and constantly moving. By the time your order reaches the exchange a few milliseconds later, the price might have moved slightly away from you. That difference between the price you wanted and the price you actually got filled at is slippage.
Every single time you enter or exit a market, you pay the spread, you pay a commission, and you risk slippage.
It is a literal toll booth. If you take unnecessary, unqualified trades. You are driving back and forth through that toll booth over and over again.
So a strategy that might actually be slightly profitable in a vacuum can become a guaranteed net loser simply because of the friction of overtrading. It's death by 1,000 microcuts.
You're just paying the broker's mortgage instead of your own. And that leads to the fourth cost, which I think is the most devastating for anyone in any high-pressure profession, psychological load.
Oh man, every single time you open a position in the market, you subject your nervous system to uncertainty. The moment money is on the line, the body responds.
Every fluctuation in price triggers microdoses of hope, fear, relief, or overconfidence.
Yeah.
If you are constantly exposed to the market through overtrading, you are constantly riding an intense physiological roller coaster.
You're dumping adrenaline and cortisol into your bloodstream all day long, and you never give your nervous system the required time to return to a baseline state of calm.
It's chronic adrenal burnout.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And eventually, the accumulated emotional pressure becomes so heavy that it completely dictates your behavior. You lose all objectivity.
You start trading just to alleviate the pain of a previous loss, and you completely lose the neutrality required to execute the three pillars.
Okay, so hearing all of that, the mathematical dilution, the decision fatigue, the fees, the adrenal burnout, a listener might think, well, the obvious solution is to just be incredibly cautious. I will just wait for the absolute 100% perfect setup where I feel totally safe.
But the text explicitly warns against this as the opposite extreme, the paradox of perfectionism.
Because we circle right back to the illusion of certainty. The author makes a profoundly important observation. Waiting for perfection is not an exercise in patience.
It is an exercise in avoidance. It's a desperate, futile attempt to escape the discomfort of uncertainty. But uncertainty is a permanent structural feature of the market environment.
No amount of confirmation, no amount of extra indicators on your chart will ever remove the risk that the trade might fail.
If you wait until there is zero fear or zero uncertainty, you will literally never do anything. You'll never launch the product, you'll never propose to your partner, you'll never pull the trigger on a trade.
You'll just sit in the bushes forever.
Which is why the author explicitly states that patience and courage are not opposites. In fact, they are deeply complementary.
This is arguably the most powerful insight in the entire text. Patience prevents premature, impulsive action. Courage prevents fear-based inaction.
And clarity is the referee that determines which of those two the current moment requires. A disciplined professional does not wait until their fear magically disappears.
They act when their objective process dictates that the risk is mathematically justified, even if the internal emotional discomfort is screaming in their ear to run away.
This is all incredible theory, but let's get down to the brass tacks of execution. How do we actually train ourselves to achieve this highly elusive state of vigilant patience?
Yeah. How do we maintain the discipline to not act prematurely, but also possess the courage not to freeze when the time comes?
And furthermore, what is the unique, massive advantage that a regular, everyday person has over massive Wall Street institutions?
The author suggests a dedicated practice of attention training.
Now, we have to manage expectations here. The goal of attention training is not to become some enlightened Zen master who never experiences a greedy or fearful thought.
You're human. Your brain is an organ designed to keep you alive, and it's going to continuously produce frantic thoughts like, I need to make this money back immediately, or this stock is flying, I am missing the move.
The goal isn't to stop those impulses. The goal is to develop the cognitive ability to observe the impulse without immediately physically obeying it.
It's about inserting a wedge. It's about breaking that deeply ingrained automatic sequence where urge equals action. We have to literally sever that wire in the brain.
Exactly. And mindfulness meditation is one of the most effective mechanical ways to train this. When you sit down to meditate, you aren't trying to empty your mind of thoughts. That's impossible.
Right. You're simply practicing the act of noticing. You notice that your attention has drifted to a stressful thought about your grocery list. You recognize the thought without judgment, and you deliberately return your focus to your breath.
Trading requires the exact same mental muscle, just applied in a high-stress environment. You notice the thought, I really want to force this low-quality trade right now. You recognize it merely as a passing mental event, not a command you must follow, and you deliberately return your focus to your trading plan.
And if someone listening isn't quite ready to commit to a daily meditation practice, the text offers plenty of very practical environmental structures you can put in place to artificially create that pause.
Things like forcing yourself to run through a physical printed checklist before your finger is allowed to click the mouse.
Or implementing a rule where you must take a literal physical step away from your desk and leave the room for 10 minutes after taking a loss.
Or using software to set a hard, daily maximum loss limit that locks you out of your platform. It's all about designing an environment that reduces the immense burden placed on your sheer willpower.
Because willpower is a finite resource that drains over the course of a day.
And while you are managing that environment, you have to be hyper-vigilant against what the author calls continuous partial attention.
Oh, this is the absolute bane of modern existence. I am guilty of this every single day.
We all are.
This is when you're half watching the market on one monitor, while half scrolling social media on your phone, while replying to a text message, while eating a sandwich.
It is neurologically the most dangerous state you can possibly be in as a decision maker. The human brain cannot actually multitask. It simply switches focus back and forth incredibly quickly, which burns massive amounts of cognitive energy.
When you are in a state of continuous partial attention, you are neither fully engaged in hunting, nor are you fully resting and recovering. You are stuck in a toxic gray zone.
Because you aren't fully focused, you will entirely miss subtle but valid opportunities. Worse, you will misread marginal setups and convince yourself they are valid.
And most dangerously, your emotional impulses, fear, and greed will slip right past your logical defenses because the guard of your attention is distracted by a YouTube video.
You must either be fully 100% engaged in a state of vigilant patience, or you must completely step away, close the screens, and recover. There's no middle ground.
Which perfectly transitions us to what I think is the most inspiring takeaway for the listener today. Because if you are a retail trader, sitting in your home office or at your kitchen table, you probably feel like you are at a massive, insurmountable disadvantage against Wall Street.
They have fiber optic cables drilled straight into the exchanges. They have algorithmic supercomputers. They manage billions of dollars. And they have entire floors of PhDs analyzing data.
But you actually possess one ultimate superpower that they do not have. You have the power to simply walk away.
It is a profound structural advantage. We assume institutions have it easy, but large financial institutions operate under massive constraints.
They have strict mandates. They have demanding client expectations.
And most importantly, they have immense liquidity needs. If a mutual fund receives $10 million in new contributions from retail 401ks on a Friday, the portfolio manager often cannot just sit on that cash.
They are contractually obligated to deploy that capital into the market, regardless of whether the current market conditions are favorable or terrible. They are literally forced to participate.
It's a true David versus Goliath dynamic, but David has a secret weapon. The Goliath institutions are forced to stand in the mud and fight every single day, no matter what the weather is.
But you, the individual, can just sit on the hill, watch them fight in the mud, and refuse to come down until the conditions perfectly favor you.
Exactly. The retail trader's greatest strategic freedom is the freedom not to participate. There's absolutely no external requirement for you to place a trade today.
There's no obligation to hold a risky position just to show a boss or a board of directors that you're active in earning your salary.
But, and I know you're going to jump on this because it is a massive caveat, the text grounds this idea very sharply.
Yeah, that beautiful superpower of walking away only actually exists if you have a rigorously defined process to begin with.
Because without a process, walking away isn't an advantage. Sitting in a cash position without a strategy isn't having a statistical edge. It is just being lost in the woods.
Avoiding every single opportunity because you literally don't know what you're looking for is not patience, it's pure ignorance.
The individual advantage only materializes when you have the ability to evaluate a live situation against your deeply tested, predefined criteria, realize the situation does not meet your high bar, and coldly reject it without any institutional pressure forcing your hand.
The flexibility to be highly selective is only meaningful if you are psychologically capable of executing a winning strategy in the first place.
It is an incredibly empowering realization, but it places the ultimate unavoidable responsibility right back squarely on our own shoulders.
We can't blame the market, we can't blame the algorithms, we can't blame the Federal Reserve.
The first variable in the equation of your success is always you.
Which is the perfect summarization of everything we've covered today. To wrap up this incredible conversation, the trade, the physical action, the click of the mouse, the sending of the email, that is only the final effect.
Before you judge the effect, you have to ruthlessly examine the internal cause. You have to examine the first variable.
And as promised, to help lock these concepts in, we're going to close this out with a structured review of today's deep dive.
Let's solidify the framework. Here's the first variable review based on the discipline of not acting. The effect. We examine the visible decision to remain inactive, such as refusing to place a trade despite the market being open.
The cause. This inactivity can stem from two very different mechanisms, either disciplined, structural adherence to a tested strategy, or fear-based emotional avoidance of necessary risk.
The mirror. This reflects whether the decision maker relies on objective mathematical criteria or if they are driven by internal emotional needs, such as the desperate need to escape boredom or the paralyzing desire to avoid uncertainty.
The responsibility. What remains entirely within your influence is creating and maintaining the mental space between the initial emotional urge to act and the final physical behavior.
The practice. You can train this specific response by implementing environmental structures, like a physical step away from the desk, a mandatory pre-action checklist, or a forced time pause to train the mind to observe an internal impulse without automatically obeying it.
Brilliant. Now, for you listening, I want you to take these high-level concepts off the screen and integrate them into your actual life this week. Here are two journal questions for you to genuinely reflect on. Number one, where in your life, whether in your portfolio, your career, or your relationships, are you currently manufacturing unnecessary action just to feel productive, alleviate boredom, or visually prove to others that you are working?
And number two, think of a recent profitable mistake you made, a fundamentally bad, impulsive decision that just happened to magically work out in your favor. Has that lucky outcome blinded you to a dangerous flaw in your decision-making process?
Those are demanding questions, but they are essential for anyone who wants to operate at a high level.
And I want to leave you with one final, unresolved thought to let simmer in your mind as you go about your week. If your long-term survival and success rely so heavily on the discipline of what you choose not to do, how much of your current exhaustion is simply the cost of your own unnecessary actions?